Okay, great. And now we're going to move on to Mark Bayer, who is going to give us a federal perspective from a very seasoned policy maker himself. And as you can see, we've sort of built up from grad student to state level to now federal seasoned policymaker perspective. So Mark, I will let you take it away.
Thanks so much. And there's been so much fantastic information. Chanel Bernat just really provided so many important insights. You know, I don't have a slide deck, and it's kind of funny. What I used to do on the Hill is my boss didn't, Ed Markey, you know, on the House side, and then now Senator Markey on the Senate side, he preferred actually to get the information by having people talk. He didn't want anyone looking at a memo. He didn't read, you know, memos that were given to him for briefing purposes. He did a lot of reading. But when he wanted to get briefed up on an issue, you had to talk to him. And so I would give briefings in the, you know, the members only elevator, going to a vote, in the, you know, in that little tram thing, which can get kind of noisy, you know, trying to explain stuff, talk over stuff, give them background information, jogging, whatever it was. But it wasn't going to be just submitting a memo and then just going back to my cubicle and doing something else. He wanted to actually talk and engage, which was fine. So I'm going to adopt a similar thing with you guys. I'm not going to actually show you any paper, but I'm going to try to structure this in a way that would be memorable. And that also, frankly, echoes things that Chanel and Bernat were talking about, and Aaron as well, and Adriana, because it's really great information. So I guess the first thing I'm going to give you, I love illusions, and I know that Aaron led off with, I'm sorry, alliterations, like my last kind of end of the day here. Alliteration is always a favorite thing of mine. Illusions are good too. But I'm going to start with the 3 R's, which are research, relevance, and relationships. And I think it was mentioned earlier on that, you know, scientists and engineers, I really believe, have a lot of the raw materials, a lot of the assets that are so important in an advocacy environment. And I'm going to start with research, which is really understanding, and Chanel touched upon this, really understanding, you know, who you're dealing with. It's going to be, if it's a member of Congress, you know, who, you know, what's the district that he or she represents? What committees is he or she on? What legislation has been introduced? Look at the press page on their website. What do they really care about? You know, obviously you want to follow them on Twitter and Facebook, and see what's really important to them. And that's going to help you calibrate how you present your message to them. Chanel talked about these different personas. Absolutely. And she said, you know, the number one thing is constituents. So, you know, when I recommend that people contact their representative or senator, it's always, I'm so-and-so from insert town or city in your district or state, immediately, right away, because that puts you in a different category. That's basically your, you know, American Express Black Card or whatever, you know, that really exclusive VIP treatment that you're going to get. Every representative in the U.S. House of Representatives represents about 720,000 people. And those are the most important people to that person, because they determine whether the representative goes back to the job 2 years from, you know, from that point, right? They are the ones who vote or decide not to, but they're the ones who have the biggest clout as far as that office is concerned. So you always want to lead with that and try to find that connection to that representative or senator's district or state. And, you know, I sometimes talk about the 20 questions to sort of ask yourself about the who, what, where, kind of try to figure out, do I have any kind of connection to this office? I mean, it would be nice if you were a constituent. That would be the number one thing. But what about your alma mater? You know, any friends or acquaintances that you know who know the member of Congress personally? Chanel mentioned contributors, things like that. What is the connection that I have? I always talk about connect before you communicate. What is the similarity that I have with this office, one way or another? And so that requires research. Good news, scientists are good at research, I'm told. So it's a matter of figuring out what to research, and I just talked about a few of those things. And then, you know, the second part is the relevance. You know, it's the relevance, which is sort of like, you know, you want to start at the finish line. You want to tell the punchline before you tell the joke, and you'll probably feel like it's doesn't really work with your logical way of thinking. And that was described, I think, by Aaron. And I agree with that, completely. I was always, what's the ask? What do you want my boss to do? What do you want us to do? And then why should, sort of, there are two flavors of kind of that as well, which is, why should I care, as a particular, this office? Or the other thing that I have advocates think about is, you may have an issue that's really important to you. And then the question is, who cares about this? Which policymaker cares about this? I had a situation where I got sort of out of the blue, someone called me and said, can you help this company? They are actually a gold mine in Canada, and they found out, he started telling me all this kind of new information, and was wondering who the CEO should talk to in Congress. Well, I knew nothing really about his issue at all, but I said, let me do a little research. And because, I've been doing this for a long time, you sort of, where, sort of 100% of your time spent on that. What is that 20% that matters most, right? Sort of the 80-20 rule. And so, kind of figuring out, all right, who in the Congress cares about this? We were able to, set up a meeting where, when the CEO met this congressman, it turned out from Nevada, that I had identified, it was like two old college friends seeing each other for the first time in 10 years, because they were both mining nerds, loved mining and minerals, and they were using all these polysyllabic words that I'd never heard of before, but they were, yucking it up. And the congressman was actually suggesting things that they could do, meaning the office could do, and he and his staff could do to help the company that we hadn't even thought of. And so it was one of those kind of 10 out of 10 meetings, but it all started with research, figuring out who should care about this. And so then, we talk about the result. I think you understand that. You want to always start at the end. Why do I care? What are the results? Why is this relevant to this district, this state? And then the relationships. A lot of people kind of figure, well, I did the Hill Day. I'll see you back in 365 more days, or whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be that way. And if you actually want to have an impact, you don't want to use that approach. That being said, it doesn't mean that you're coming to DC, every month or every quarter. There are so many different ways that you can make your influence or grow your influence with that office. And Chanel talked about some of those things. You're following, you're posting, you're tweeting. First thing you want to do is, you don't want to leave that office without getting a picture. You want politicians love the picture, even if it's with a staffer. Would you mind if we took a picture? No one in the history of Capitol Hill, at least in the office, in the office, has ever said no in the public areas. And so you get the picture, and now you have a picture. So you tweet it out, you post it on Facebook. So great to meet with Congresswoman X about HR 1234, blah blah blah, and that gets noticed, in the office, and you can build on that. If you want to have an impact, and I mean more than just like a passing impact, you want to build a relationship and not just be a request. It's not a one-off thing. I think, like, you may have some neighbors or people that right? And you only really hear from them when they need something from you. You only really hear from them when they want to borrow something. They don't really go out of their way to actually build any sort of rapport with you. It's very much a one-way street. Now, I will say that members of Congress and staff, we're in the business of listening to and working on requests and things like that. We always want to know, what do you want? What do you want us to do? What is the ask? That's for sure. But I think it was maybe Aaron who mentioned, these members of Congress and staff are people too, in the respect that if they do something that you've asked them to do, then recognize it. Do something on social media. Let them know that you appreciate that vote, or they sent that letter you had asked them to, and publicize the fact that they did what you wanted them to do. And if you continue to sort of develop this, and it's a very low impact activity. I remember once I gave a talk at UNT Chapel Hill, and one of the postdocs raised his hand in the audience. He's like, I only have an hour a week to engage. And I said, if you engage an hour a week for this congressman's office, it was, you're going to be ahead of 99.99% of the people in that district as far as influence in the office. And it can be a tweet, it can be calling, it can be actually curating some stuff too. It's so busy, there's so many different issues. And, as was mentioned before, I think Chanel most recently said, the definition of experts is very different in the academic world versus the policy world, right? Just because you didn't do your postdoc or your thesis, or you were, you weren't the PI on a project, not only should you feel licensed, and I would encourage you to talk about what you did in that particular subject matter, but you can also apply, your critical thinking, the scientific kind of training that you got, and kind of put that on the table, and you'll be head and shoulders above, others in that conversation. And you shouldn't sort of sideline yourself just because you feel you're not an expert in a particular policy, or you have a lot of underlying skills that you can bring to bear that, frankly, people in the policy world, don't have, and that they're still nevertheless respected. The last thing I'll say about the relationship building is, because there are so many issues, and because we have to be generalists, had to be a generalist, there is a reliance on experts. And so, you have the meeting, you get the picture, say, you tweet it out, do your social media stuff. And then, you should feel like you could go back to that staffer and say, would it be, it was such a great meeting, thank you so much. Would it be helpful if periodically I send you a clip, an email, or a little article I saw, or something about that's relevant to our discussion about this policy? I'm not going to spam you, but I'm just wondering if that would be helpful. I can tell you, you're going to get, I always welcomed that. People who were, they were judicious. It wasn't like they were sending me stuff all the time. I didn't want that. But if they saw an article or something like that that helped focus, and crystallize a particular issue every now and again, that was really, really helpful. And I viewed them as a resource, which can lead to all sorts of opportunities, meaning testifying before Congress, or participating in a press conference, or giving comments on a bill, and actually writing legislative language that is baked into, a bill. And that all starts with this idea of, okay, this isn't a one-off request that I'm making here. I want to build a relationship with this office. Two quick things I just want to touch upon as my dog makes her way into the office. Sorry, is people typically don't think about this, but I just want to put this out there so it'll be on your radar screen. So you spend all this time deciding what you're going to say, and you've got it all honed down, and you're going to, do your thing. And then you go into the office, you sit down with a staffer, and you're like maybe 10 seconds in to your presentation, and the person says, yeah, that's great. Yeah, she's on board. Absolutely. That sounds great. So what do you do if you get like an immediate yes? I mean, do you just say, well, that was okay, see you later, see you next year? And I say, like, no, you, instead of viewing that as the end, I would view that as a big opening to say, oh, it's so great, the boss is on board with this. Are there other people we should talk to? Are there other people who might object to this? Are there other natural allies that you think that we now, right? It's me and you, the member or staffer, should identify, so we can make this bigger and build this coalition. And then the other thing I would say is, we talked a bit about storytelling, and this kind of gets a little bit into the messaging area. Storytelling is great. Also, I would encourage scientists to think about what I call micro stories, which are which are metaphors, similes, allusions to pop culture, acronyms. I thought Bernat did a really good job. He gave you that success acronym to think about. So I would just think about the micro story is something that can be, that you should always be thinking about, which is, what is this policy? What is this research? What is this technical topic? What is it like in the real world? What's a comparison that I can draw that's relatable and that's understandable? And it makes it so much easier and there's much better interaction when I can sort of immediately get a frame of reference for what you're saying. And because nobody on the other end, no staffer is probably going to tell you they don't understand what you're talking about, because they feel like they need to be, in the kind of authority position, and they, they're not going to tell you that. So, but you can sort of break through and develop this kind of rapport by immediately giving them something that they can latch onto and understand, and then you can go and describe it in more detail. And the thing there is, don't be freaked out when you think, like, well, my research is not exactly like this metaphor, but the point, or simile. But the point is that that's why there is something called, that's what the simile or metaphor is about. It's not 100% exactly what you're talking about, but it gives your audience a frame of reference to understand and then begin a more productive dialogue. So I wish you good luck as you go to this next stage in the certification and the program, and I'm happy to be a part of it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Mark. I think we're technically out of time, but I want to ask just one very quick question, and that's about how to make effective asks, or if you could give examples of effective asks. And what I'm thinking of, and in full disclosure to the group, I worked with Mark at Senator Markey's office, and had a lot of groups that came in and said support, research funding, et cetera. And of course, Senator Markey supports research funding. And it wasn't until somebody came to me and talked to me about a Dear Colleague letter that I could actually do something more than that. So can you give like a few examples very quickly of what effective asks look like?
Right. Okay, that's a very good question. Some of this comes right out of the research that you might do, but having some sort of whether it is a sign-on letter, would he consider, would she consider putting out, even if you say putting out a statement, something just happened, would the boss consider putting out a supportive statement in favor of X? Would the boss consider maybe even, like I would kind of be creative. So like, if you're having an event somewhere, would the boss do like a 30-second just welcome, to the attendees? Usually they love to do that, and it can be really easy. And all this is sort of part of this kind of relationship, ongoing interaction with the office. But if you had a particular, letter, or if you were looking for information, if you wanted more research done on a particular topic, would the boss consider sending a letter to the Government Accountability Office about this topic? And then, the GAO is a great organization. Some of you may be not just familiar with it, but maybe work there or anyway. But that is a great way to get sort of the imprimatur of a very well-respected, investigative arm of Congress, well-respected organization to delve into your issue. And then you could even say to the office, and I could help prepare the request letter. We could work together for the request letter to GAO to scope out the project. So those are kind of like sophisticated, a little bit more sophisticated than your average advocate kind of ask. But I think Dan is absolutely right. The more specific that you can be, the better. And then offer yourself as a resource to help implement it. I mean, obviously say, well, can you sign on? I mean, that's, or maybe say like, we could help collect signatures. Like, let's talk about who the target offices are. We could help, promote this as well.
Yeah, that's really great. I like to, I think without having been on the inside, it's hard to know all the different things you can ask your member to do. And so, yeah, thank you for going over those. I think that's really great for people to know.
Sure.
Okay.